Hey guys, welcome to the Curt Schilling Baseball Show, show number 25. I'm Curt Schilling. He's Bill Graff. Bill, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing really well, Curt. Excited to talk about some ball here.
Yeah, some interesting week. Some cool, fun inside the game stuff happening that we can talk about. A ridiculously cringe-worthy moment in Sunday Night Baseball that probably needs to be touched on. Some guy going crazy in the minor leagues too. But we're going to start as usual, where baseball epicenter starts, or the epicenter of baseball starts, in New York. So long conversation on Twitter the other day, and we talked about it. I've talked about it with a bunch of different people. ESPN or the Toronto broadcast with Dan Shulman caught Aaron Judge doing something that was noted and of note. They zeroed in on his head and caught him. I don't know if I can do it right here, but like they caught him looking out of the side of his, instead of looking at the pitcher, he was looking at the dugout, or they thought it was the dugout. He said it was the dugout. But, you know, with sign stealing, all stuff going on, everyone's become hyper aware. Dan Shulman speculated the Judge might have been trying to look at catcher Alejandro Kirk to figure pitch calls, but Jay's color commentator thought it was like after Judge said he was looking toward the Yankee dugout because he heard some teammates yelling, Toronto suspicious. They're saying they're monitoring the situation. I think Judge said that some guys were talking trash in the Yankee dugout and they were up 6-0, and he doesn't like that stuff and all that goes with that, which is okay. That's one explanation. John Schneider, Toronto manager, said it's kind of odd, that a hitter would be looking in that direction. He's obviously looking in that direction for a reason. I think we'll dive into it a little bit more tonight and tomorrow. I'll make sure that he's doing everything he can to not make ourselves susceptible to tendencies, locations, pitches, or anything like that. And the second word is the key. So one of the things that you can do, and again, we talked about this the other day, I mentioned about Alex Rodriguez and the stuff like that. Catchers or hitters that look away from, so hitting is hard enough as it is, and the hitters for the most part will be looking at this little arm slot for pitchers and focusing on where the hand comes through the zone. But you look what you're, and I walk through this, but I want to go through this kind of in depth in the sense that what you'll do is you'll look towards this way, and a lot of guys with dark glasses will do it all the time, but you'll look towards this way, and you're not looking this way. You're just looking to see if you can see the catcher out of your peripheral vision. And I think that's what he was doing, because if you're facing a right-hander, contrary to what Jackson said, that he was tipping his pitches to Judge, he threw a ball in the middle of the plate that should have gotten whacked 400 miles. And we'll talk about pitch tipping in just a second, though. Anyway, the next, on Tuesday, they played again. Domingo Germán was suspended for 10 days because he had a sticky substance on his hand. And this is interesting, because I wonder if umpires are really that unaware of what rosin looks like. Anyway, he got ejected in the fourth inning for a foreign substance check. The crew chief said it was the stickiest hand I've ever felt and extremely shiny, and substance was definitely not rosin. Germán insisted that it was. So that's, and I think Billy got 10 days, right?
10 days. It's automatic. 10 days.
Yeah. 10 days. So that happened, and I'm going to assume generally rosin isn't sticky unless you mix it, or isn't shiny unless you mix it with something else, just because rosin ends up getting dirty. It's got kind of a matte look, very flat. But along those lines, Jackson, the pitcher for Toronto, who Aaron hit a ball out of the stadium on, that he was tipping his pitches. He confirmed that he was tipping his pitches during the game. A Yankees first base coach could see Jackson's grip, not technically illegal, but careless by any pitcher. So there's a history of this in the game forever. And great players, Alex Cora was the best I ever saw at it, pick this stuff up. And as a pitcher, I used to be, when I wasn't pitching for 4 days, I would always, every now and then, I would watch the guy, and you could pick up stuff literally on a pitch. True story, back in 2001 in the World Series, the Yankees came back and beat us 3 in Yankee Stadium. We were down 3-2 going to Arizona, and Randy Johnson was facing Andy Pettitte in Game 6, and we beat them, I think, 16-2. Andy Pettitte tipped every single pitch he threw that game out of the stretch, everyone, and we caught it literally on the first at bat of the game. We knew about it, but he had kind of changed it, but he went back to it and he tipped every single pitch. And pitch tipping isn't what you think it is, in the sense that you have to notice a tip early to use it. You can't notice something in the middle of the windup and say, oh, breaking ball. Well, most hitters I know can't. You recognize before the pitch. And what it was when Andy would come, and if you remember, Andy Pettitte had a phenomenal pickoff move. When Andy went to the stretch when there was a runner on base, his hand set high for fastball and low for slider. And it was noticeably bad. And if you go back and watch that game, we absolutely blasted him to beat them like 16-2 in Game 5. Every pitch from the stretch he tipped. So Andy, if you were wondering why that game was struggling, that's why. We knew what you're throwing. Still got to make the pitches, but so that's one way. Most of the other ways come this way. So for me, when I held my split-fingered fastball, I held it like this. So my hand was always wider off the ball. So I would have my glove, if I had so for example, if I had my fingers in my glove like this on my fastball, I would have to go and open my fingers a little wider so my glove would fan out on my split. So I held my split every time and went from my split grip to my fastball grip without changing my glove, right? So if I'm here and I've got my fastball grip, then I have to kind of go wide to move my glove to get my split grip. You can see that very early, very noticeable. But what I did was I went straight to my split grip, which is why my finger's now bent out for life. I would hold my glove open, and then so what I would do is, just kind of showing you this, what I would do is sometimes I would grab my glove and move it around without doing anything to the ball. Or I would hold my glove still and change my grip. The only pitch I had trouble with was my curveball, because I had such a weird grip and I had to grip it so hard that I literally had to kind of grip it like before I got here and put it up, because I couldn't change. I couldn't go from this to my curveball grip in my stretch, in my windup. So, but I could go from my split to anything else. So for example, as I wound up and it come over my head, I could change the ball to that without doing anything to my glove or fanning or opening or moving or anything. But tipping, like the Astros cheating thing worked because they found out far enough ahead of time that you could bang the garbage can well ahead of the pitcher being in his windup, right? Because I think most hitters would agree, if you're gonna tip and you're gonna give me a pitch, don't do it in the middle of a delivery, because then that's just pointless. And there were guys also, like Alex wanted to know if a guy could get a sign at second base and translate to the hitter. And they do that with all sorts of things. So guys from second base, guys that are on second base reading signs, they'll give, hey, listen, if I'm on both hands on my knees, it's a fastball. If I'm standing straight up, it's a breaking ball. If I grab my shirt, it's a breaking ball. If I tug my pants, it's a fast, whatever. But hitters wanted to know with enough time to process. And so Alex was a guy as I heard, who, if you could get him, I want to know. Other guys wanted nothing to do with it, because think about this. If you're at the plate and you get fastball away and the guy screws up and it's a fastball in, you're getting hit in the temple with a 96-mile-an-hour fastball because you're cheating so bad. Some guys didn't want to know. Some guys wanted to know at every turn. It was very different, very hitter dependent. But there were guys who were, like I said, Alex Cora, I know it's kind of ironic that he was part of that whole scandal, but he was the best I ever saw at it. He could pick up a pitcher tipping with 1 or 2 pitches. And there are other guys like that. And to you young players that are potential, 25th men on a roster or utility guys, you want to make yourself valuable. That's another way. It's baseball IQ. It's baseball IQ. Being able to tell, sometimes the catcher will tip it away. Sometimes the catcher will give it away. Very rarely these days will you see a catcher give it away, in the sense that when the Blue Jays were talking about, the catcher was giving signs so bad the first base coach could read it. Well, again, when you're a hitter and you're looking at the pitcher like this, and the pitcher's literally kind of you're not looking away or looking around at other places. You have milliseconds to do all your processing, and getting back into focus on the pitcher is just not something that people do naturally. It's not what people think it is. I mean, it's, maybe in a 30 and over league, it works like that, or a men's slow pitch. Sure, I get it, but not in the big leagues. Things happen so fast. Guys process so fast that, and I said this before, there were guys who were at another level. Barry Bonds was a guy who literally told me, and I think I said this before, I threw him some amazing splits early in my career, never swung at him. And he told me early in my career that he could see my grip as my hand was coming through the throwing slot. Now you got to remember, this is happening at thousands of RPM. Like the arm through the throwing zone is happening in thousandths of a second. So him being able to see my fingers split apart on the ball means that he was genetically cheating. God gave him some stuff nobody else had. And then there are guys like Ted Williams who could see rotation out of your hand, which, again, I believe that, absolutely. And I will tell a Ted Williams story one day about one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. At like 60 years old, he did. And it's one off of a story that somebody on the Yankees told a long time ago about him being able to see the bat strike the ball at contact. So, so that's tipping. Tipping generally has to do with the pitcher's glove, where his hand's set, or how his glove manipulates before. And it's funny because I played with some guys, some really talented guys, who they believed anytime they gave up a hit, they had to be tipping a pitch. Like, I can remember RJ at times saying, oh, I definitely was tipping because that guy got a hit off me. And it was funny, like, that's, and you have to have that kind of an ego, I guess. But there are guys who believe, and then there are guys who weren't good enough to think that, who said, oh, I have to be tipping my pitches. It was like, no, you didn't. You just stuck and you were throwing the ball down the middle. So
I've got two takes on this.
Yep.
Real quick, Curt. One, all of it's legal. If you catch people tipping, it's legal to catch them. If as long as you're doing it within the concept, it's part of baseball.
As long as you're not banging a trash can based on a video.
And the yelling and screaming between the Yankees bench and the Toronto bench, it's the AL East. Right. These games mean a lot. There's always going to be that. So it's all just part of the game.
I don't ever want baseball to lose that. That's the heat of the moment competition thing that umpires get thrust in the middle of, and they have no understanding of what's going on to the degree it's going on, and no concept of that's just the way the game plays. And that used to be taken care of by the teams. Right. If you're given sign, I mean, I can remember, honest to God, I can remember stories and then hearing Nolan Ryan thought that somebody was giving signs from second base and basically said, he stepped off the mound and looked at the guy at second base and kind of nodded his head. And the next time the guy came up, there was a baseball inside his ribcage. And you don't do it again. That was how it was done. And I know that's the old school, tough guy, but that was how you policed yourself in the game. You didn't throw people's heads. I'm not talking about, Juan Marichal taking a bat to home plate or using a bat to kill somebody, but you did that. You took care of that on the field. And as far as tipping goes, it's been around forever. And if you can get a guy, and it takes baseball IQ to figure it out. There are hitters that tip, and there are hitters will tip again to pitchers, vice versa. You just have to be smart enough to understand what you're looking at and how you're looking at it. And having somebody on, like I said, I used to try and look early on and talk to the guys and there were guys who say, hey, listen, if you see anything, let me know. And it speaks volumes to guys like Maddox and all those other guys. They understand, and it's what you did in the minor leagues when you spent 300, 400, 500, 600 innings in the minor leagues. You generally, every kid on the planet comes into the professional baseball tipping somehow, and you learn in the minor leagues to address it and fix it and amend it. But with 80 innings in the minor leagues, there's so much other stuff on your plate when you get to the big leagues. It's the last thing in the world that you're doing. And that's what, you hear people talk, Bill, about, second, third time around the league, well, that's what happens. Second or third time around the league, there's enough video. They're like, oh, okay. When he throws his slider, he's setting at his stomach. And when he throws his fastball, he's setting at his chest. Or when he, from here, if you see him move the pinky side of his glove, that's his cutter. Or if you, stuff like that, that just guys pick it up. Terry Francona was phenomenal at it too. And a lot of that has to do with your position. Like I said, guys, a lot of guys, Gary Varsho, whose son Dalton Varsho is by the way, Dalton Varsho is named after Darren Dalton, for those of you that didn't know. Gary Varsho was a guy who was a utility guy, a 10th man, but he had baseball IQ out of the universe, and that was something that he did. And you attain and accrue extra value by being one of those guys. So anyway, a sad note. And the answer before is no, Bill. I never had any interaction or run-in with Don Denkinger. He passed away at 86. And unfortunately, he will be remembered for probably the worst call in World Series history. Cardinals. Royals. Todd Worrell, I think, was the pitcher. Bang bang play at first base. That wasn't a bang bang play. It was safe by 77 feet, out by. He was out, and he called him safe.
Right.
He was out by 12 feet, and he called him safe. And it was just one of those calls and it changed the outcome of the game. Now, much like go back to the Cubs Marlins when Moises Alou went to the stands to catch the ball and claim fan interference, and what was his name?
I don't remember the own.
Starts with the guy that got ousted out of Chicago.
Bartman.
John
Bartman was the guy who.
Yeah. And everybody blamed the Cubs blamed him for costing him the playoffs. There was about 15 things that happened after that could have prevented them from losing that game, and that didn't happen. It had nothing to do with that. That might have been a factor, but certainly not. But this was a huge call in a big moment in a big game that turned the course of the game and changed the outcome of the World Series. That big of a deal. So I am going to. So I promised you guys the other day. There's a couple things. Actually, I want to mention two other quick things. Colt Keith, who is on the he's 87 on the overall prospect list. Colt Keith hit for the cycle in the minor leagues. All right. He's the 87th overall prospect. He's playing for the Tigers, 5th round draft pick, playing for the Erie Seawolves. He had not that he only hit for the cycle. He had 2 home runs and had 6 hits, and is the first player to have a six hit cycle with multiple home runs. And I'm going to guess that might include the big leagues. I'm not sure, but I'm going to assume that it does. And we'll get. I
would do more than assume. I would almost guarantee.
Yeah. This is the first cycle on a 6-hit night with 2 home runs. And then before we get to my funniest teammates in history for me, we got to talk about a very cringeworthy moment on ESPN. So I think one of the greatest inventions in the last 10 years has been miking players. I think baseball has the ability to do it way better than any other sport with all the quote unquote downtime, much less so with the pitch clock now. But I think the sport is made for it. Plus, I think there's so many funny guys in baseball that you could do that. Anyway, Sunday night, Tristan Casas, the first baseman for the Red Sox, was mic'd up. And if you guys remember, Sunday was Mother's Day. So I look at this mic'd up moment as, hey, let me ask you a funny story about an at-bat. You could tell me over a couple pitches, maybe. But you're looking for quick hit and miss stuff. Ravitch dropped I know your mom passed away when you were young. What does Mother's Day mean for you and your brother? And the answer was uncomfortably awkward would be the best possible description I could put on it. And here's the answer. What happened was unfortunate to me, but I have so many mother figures in my life, whether they have my last name or whether they don't. I know she's watching me every day. I know she's smiling and proud of me. Yeah, for the most part, I think I've been all right. I'm not even going to comment on what that answer potentially entails. I'm just going to say that that's probably not what they were thinking of when they had this whole mic'd up thing going. But I love you, Carl. But I think you totally crocked that one. 5 funniest teammates. All right.
Wait, before you get to that, I don't want to go by this week without talking about Ronald Acuna real quick.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There have been 7 home runs hit over 450 feet.
Right.
He's got 3 of them.
Right.
The dude
and he just
leads
turned
the
what,
NL
13?
in
Didn't he just turn like 13?
Yeah. I also found this one that I didn't put on the sheet, but there have been exit velocity of 105 miles per hour off the bat, and Acuna has hit the ball that hard 47 times. The next guy, there's two of them at 34, Devers and Vlad Jr. This is the first time we brought him up on the show, but this guy's in another world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of those things that you look at the new sabermetric guys who exit velocity is so important to them. And I'm not sure. So I don't know how it quantifies itself into a statistic. I do know, just like spin rate, that there's absolutely a fundamental foundational element to it that's important, right? Because basically what it means is, not basically, but you're hitting the ball harder than other people, right? And
Right.
I would assume that there's an exit velocity level where when you're above this, you're elite. When you're below it, you're a big leaguer. And when you're at this level, you're probably not, because you're talking about when you put the ball in play, there's 8 guys that can catch it, right? So in a sense, you're taking away the ability of players to move, because so a ball comes off the bat. Let's say a ball comes off the bat at 105 miles an hour. Let's just say it's a ground ball. Well, that means that position players in X and Y position only have X amount of time to defend that ball. So when you talk about range metrics and all this other stuff, that factors into defensive metrics, I think, in a way that maybe fans don't understand and maybe baseball hasn't fully encompassed. But yeah, I mean, and I find it very, very telling that all 3 of those guys are young players.
Right.
Right. I think, and what that means, but I think that's the new convention of hitting, the new approach, which is swing hard. And that's why the kid, and I'm going to, somebody help me with his last name, the kid that is in Florida now that came from Minnesota, the contact kid, oh my goodness.
The guy kid who's in Arizona?
Urias.
Hold on.
Yeah, Urias. I guarantee you his exit velocities aren't elite, but the guy doesn't swing and miss, which used to be an insanely valuable trait. Maybe it's undervalued now because I don't care if you make contact. If your exit velocity is averaging X, then whatever. This kid, when people talk about 400 never being done again, or the 56 game hitting streak, that's the kind of hitter that I'm talking about that can potentially be that guy. He doesn't swing and miss. When that was the hitter I disliked the most. I didn't have a problem if a guy struck out 100 times. I had issues with guys who didn't swing and miss, because then I had to manipulate the ball in the strike zone to a place where I could control where they made contact and where they hit the ball. And that's not necessarily easy to do. All right. Anyway, 5 funniest teammates. So the first 3 on my list are kind of like, I hate to use his name, but they're kind of like Michael Jordan to the NBA. There's these 3, and then there's other really awesome guys, but they're not on this level. First one was David West, big left-handed reliever who actually sadly recently just passed away from brain cancer a couple years back. One of the funniest human beings I've ever known in my life. Doug Mirabelli, still a dear close friend, and Damian Miller from the Arizona Diamondbacks catcher. These 3 guys, and what made them funny was a lot of different stuff. So, and I'll tell this first little joke, and it's gonna probably, it's more adult content than not, but I got to tell it because you probably won't laugh really hard at the way it's said, but you will if you understand the moment. You'll die laughing. We were in a house of ill repute when I was a younger player. And I was with David West, and there was a young lady who was doing what she did professionally on a stage, and she had long white stockings on. And in the middle of the performance, and it was an A+ performance, I might add, David West just nonchalantly says, "God, I wish I looked that good in my sandies." And I lost it. I literally fell on the ground laughing. I was puking, almost throwing up, laughing, because it was said with a straight face, completely out of nowhere, and perfectly toned, that it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Doug Mirabelli was a guy at 4 a.m. when you're on a bus in customs in Toronto and everybody's miserable because you just lost 8-0. Doug Mirabelli was the guy in the back of the bus that could say something and the entire bus would laugh out loud. And he was just that guy every team had to have. He just had it, and he still has it. He's still one of the. There is a website, and I think it's called Dougie Goes Deep. Dougie had this, like, it was an urban legend, and it is literally one of the funniest websites that has ever. It's just all these things about Doug, like Chuck Norris. Like, people talk about Chuck Norris. Someone made a website for Doug Mirabelli, and you have to read it. I think it's called DougieGoesDeep.com, but Google it, you'll find it. It's hilarious. And then Damian Miller. There's very few things I liked about Milwaukee. The whole town smelled like Schlitz beer, which I had a problem with. But Damian was a cheesehead from Wisconsin. And apparently they're just funny people, because everything out of this guy's mouth was funny. He could say stuff on the mound during a catcher's when he come out that would I would laugh. I just would laugh. He just had that. And it's when you realize really funny people are just naturally funny. They just, the things that they say and do, they don't try, they just are. And those three guys were on a level, a cut above. The other two guys, believe it or not, were Phillies teammates. Kevin Jordan, who was a utility guy, a phenomenal guy. He had a dry sense of humor that was, it was awesome. It was awesome. And the other guy who is still a dear friend of mine, who my career arc kind of interspersed with this guy multiple times, was Todd Pratt. He was deprecating to a degree that was funny, was beyond funny. First of all, he was a phenomenal guy. But he was that guy who would say stuff about himself. And then he was the guy that would do stuff on the field that he would be the only guy that would do it. Like, he swung and twisted his ankle in an at-bat and went on the disabled list. Or now it was the injured list now. Swinging, he twisted his ankle and fell down. And it was one of those, and he had a laugh that was beyond funny. His laugh was as funny as, it's almost like Bert Kreischer. The laugh is as funny as the comedy. And so you laugh no matter what. And he was that guy too. He could make people laugh at different times. And he was incredibly loved and respected by all of his teammates everywhere he went for that reason. He was a gamer, great guy. And a kind of a sleeper guy on the list might be all, when I do my most athletic teammates, this guy might also make it as well. Brian Anderson, left-handed pitcher. He's on the air for the Rays now. He was one of the funniest guys I've ever seen. And one of my most vivid memories was opening day for college football season. I came into the locker room and he had his ankles and his wrist taped, and he had a football jersey on, and he was calling audibles in the middle of the Arizona Diamondback clubhouse. He was that kind of a college football fan. And I'm going to go one honorable mention. So the funniest coach that I ever played with, might have been one of the funniest human beings I've ever known, was a gentleman named Brian Butterfield. Brian was a lifelong coach. He was in Arizona when I got there in 2000. And this is almost the same story. So, and I've talked to Butter forever. And I love the man to death. Great coach, phenomenal coach. But he, opening day of college. So Brian Butterfield is a Michigan fan to the point where it's uncomfortable. He's a Michigan fan. I came into the clubhouse on the opening day of Michigan's football season. He was in a 4-point stance in the middle of the locker room, naked. And when I say naked, I mean raw, buck naked, with the Michigan Wolverines football helmet on. In a 4-point stance, calling out snap counts. And then hiking and like rushing the fake quarterback, naked. And it was just pure gold. It was every time I vision the guy, I see him naked in a 4-point stance with a Michigan Wolverines football helmet on. And it just makes me laugh. And he was one of those. He was a phenomenal coach, phenomenal human being. So there's my list of funnies. And I know I've left people out. Guys like Mark Lewis, Billy Miller was quietly funny. Dustin Pedroia was funny. But those guys were in my. And if I forget somebody, I'll bring him on. I'll bring him back later. But that was, and Bill, I got a lot of good recommendations for best of lists. So this is going to be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and I got a couple as well. So we will build them.
On Tuesday of next week, we'll do another one. Like I said, it'll be, I'll do best defensive players, but also do like my best third baseman, best whatever, because there's an endless amount of things you can do here. So anyway, Billy, I'm headed to the University of Tennessee for my daughter's graduation.
Congratulations.
She is a volunteer and a college graduate, so I'm very excited for this weekend. And I will catch you guys, Cal and John, I'll catch you guys on Tuesday next week. Take care.